All right. I think we got the audio going now. Check, check. All right. It's like just my luck. I forget to put my audio on. All right, let's try this again. Hey everybody. Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. To all the solo dads out there, this one is for you, right? You didn't get a brunch, you didn't get a card, but you got me and our community. So today we're going to have a lot of fun. Let's say hello to everybody out there. It's like I got so excited. Wait, where's my microphone? So here we are. What we have today is something special. First, the G5 got its firmware update on the 33.11.35. Sony Bravia 8, no firmware updates recently. It is on the most recent firmware, and we have the BVM3110. And to set the stage real quick, the BVM3110 is calibrated, whereas the Bravia 8 II is not out of the box, and the LG G5 is not out of the box. And the reason we do that is 99% of you will not calibrate this TV. However, you do want to know how close is it to reference, and that's what the BVM3110 is. That's that little TV right there. And what we're going to do is we're going to do some comparisons and all the different things, right? So, okay, hello everybody. Hi, Apple Jelly, always good to see you. And Awkward Teeth is here. Jay Tandon, I love that name, Awkward Teeth. I have awkward teeth. Hey Robert, welcome, welcome. Hope you all had a good time in the last live stream. That was quite fury. And I did not expect how many people are calling me a Sony shill when today I'm an LG shill. You watch. By the time we're done with this video, suddenly I'm on LG's payroll, right? But hey, at the end of the day, we're going to have fun. All right, let's see. What's it? G wins out of the box unless it's the camera. Wait a minute. I got to show you my settings and everything, right? Hey, Max Overdrive, thank you for coming by. Okay, where was I real quick? Oh, well, obviously, audio is working. Actually, I need to double check. Is audio working? If it's not, let me know. Otherwise, I've been talking to myself the last 2 minutes. Again, happy Father's Day to all who's coming in. And this is content from Jennifer Gala. Thank you so much, Jennifer. There she is, our girl. If you guys don't know, this is Jennifer. This is her content. And we are watching her Dolby Vision complete calibration. If you need it in Dolby Vision, join her Patreon, download it. This is the HDR10 Plus version though. And we're going to go right from the beginning. I love this new content you made, Jennifer. One of my favorites for sure. So we're going to start off with, I'll tell you guys real quick what we will be doing. So we're going to do some comparisons today. We're going to do HDR impact, that's first, then some skin tones, and then shadow detail. And so the firmware update is supposed to definitely address shadow detail, black level, black crushing, the stuff I was complaining about on the last one. I'm not going to dive into things like ringing, contouring, banding, not because I don't want to, it's just because it's too difficult to show on YouTube, on the camera. I literally would have to do a lot of close-ups, and the compression on YouTube just doesn't help. So that's going to that will have to be on another video. Today, though, we can see shadow detail, black levels, right? If there's any crushing, we're going to hyperexpose, and you'll see all of that. And of course, skin tones, you will see, and HDR impact, right? So we'll start off with HDR impact using Jennifer's content. Oh, she's so awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And what else today? Oh, yeah. Caleb is here. Hey, Caleb. Happy Father's Day, my friend. Happy Father's Day. Thank you for dropping by. And if you don't know, he's got an amazing GoFundMe page to help him stay alive and fight off the big boys in a lawsuit between him and Digital Trends. Okay, let's do this. Now, with HDR impact, what we have is a reference monitor, right? This reference monitor is capable of up to 5,000 nits almost, on a small 5 to 10% window, something like that. So no content gets that bright. However, if the content demands it, it can do it. And Jennifer has content that pushes it. But realistically, you will see the BVM3110 being a little bit brighter than the TVs because the TVs are OLED, right? And as bright as they get, this is in filmmaker mode, and it won't get as bright as a reference monitor because, hey, it's not a mini LED. So what I'm going to do right now is pause real quick and go over the settings that we have so that you guys can see what the settings are, what the firmware update is, and we'll take it from there. And we'll start with the LG. Quick here. You know what the problem is? Here we go. This finger, I'm sorry, the magic finger is flying all over the place. Okay, filmmaker mode. Why are we in filmmaker mode? Because we have a reference monitor that is the most accurate to the reference monitor, right? No funny business. And what we'll do is, as you can see, brightness 100. This is all default. No dynamic tone mapping. We might play with it if we need to. Otherwise, we won't. This is the default setting for filmmaker mode. More importantly, I will make sure to reset it so any leftover settings I forgot about will not be there. And then, so you guys can see, we are on software 33.1135. That's the latest software update, and that's the good stuff, right? That's the one that's supposed to fix all the issues. And I'll tell you right now, it did fix a few things. Maybe it fixed them too well. So here's the Sony, and also Sony is in, I go to the picture settings real quick. Professional mode is the equivalent of filmmaker mode on the Sony, right? Brightness max, these are all default for maximum accuracy out of the box. Color is at expert 1, all right. All that craziness is off. Okay, and I think we're set to go. Let me say hello to everyone. Peter Griffin. The dads didn't get a discount on OLEDs at all at the big box stores. They hate us. You know what's ironic? I bet you during Mother's Day, jewelry got a discount. And I bet you underwear at Calvin Klein maybe got a discount. But definitely, we want TVs. So thanks for that. And let's see here. All right, so we're all caught up. Update is good to go. Let's look at HDR impact. And I will adjust exposure accordingly as it gets brighter. I'll lower the exposure so you can see the detail. But so far, the TVs look very similar out of the box. And this is why I tell you guys, more often than not, the flagship TVs today, not 5 years ago, the flagship TVs today are so good out of the box. Now, what's interesting is, I'm going to stop right here. Is it me, or does the chocolate cream look a little different on the Sony than on the LG? And I think the LG looks more similar to the reference monitor. Now, I know it's just whipped cream. I'm just saying that white point looks more similar on the G5, on the 3110, doesn't it? That's what I'm seeing. And it's not just my camera. Tell me what you guys think. Okay. These are little things, right? I've noticed. All right, let's move on. This is pretty good. They're pretty similar. This is an easy, lower brightness scene, so they should look very similar. And go ahead and ask questions, my friends. We're here for you for the next 2 hours or so. Any questions you have, whether it's the G5, the Sony, or the 3110. And I am here with my flame suit on. I know you guys are mad at me from the last live stream, but I was being fair-minded on the last live stream. I call it as I see it, and many of you did not like that, and we will do the same here today. I will call it as I see it. Whether or not it's good for Sony is not important to me, right? And if anything, I don't think you guys even know this, the G5 is the TV that I personally chose, and I have to remind people of this all the time. This is the TV I like for HDR impact. The Bravia 8 Mark II, it's a TV I need to review because it's a good TV. But otherwise, I have no favorites. I'm even wearing an LG hat. I'm sure Sony would be very upset if they paid me. I'm wearing an LG hat today. All right, let's see which looks better at 4,000 and 10,000 nits. That's the tone mapping challenge. So if you don't know, none of these TVs are capable of 4,000 or 10,000 nits. Not even my BVM 3110 is capable of 10,000 nits. It will clip. So when we have these bright scenes that are 10,000, we're going to have to look at these two TVs. Oh, right here, I'm already seeing a difference. Let's go back real quick. All right, let's catch that sunset. Boom, right there. Okay. Now, which TV looks more like the BVM 3110? The Sony is showing me more color, but is that correct color? Or is the G5 more like the BVM3110? This is why we have a reference monitor. Without the reference monitor, I would say, oh look, the Sony has more color. Oh look, but the 3110 looks more similar to the G5. I'm looking with my eyes, not just on the YouTube. And yeah, the Sony has a bit of orange, but is that accurate? Sony, what do you think? I hope Sony's here watching and shaking their heads. What's Fomo doing? And as you saw, I reset both TVs, so there's no funny business. And the BVM is fully calibrated. And so let's move on. And yeah, false hope. If you're seeing it on YouTube the way I'm seeing it, I believe the G5 does more closely match the 3110. And again, this is out of the box. So what does this mean when I say out of the box? It means that if you hire a calibrator, Classy or Dwayne Davis or any of our friends, to calibrate, the Sony will be made to look like the BVM3110. But out of the box, when you have no calibration, right now, I think the G5, I agree, a false hope, it does look more accurate. All right, let's do this. Moving on. John's Stargate G5 winner. Okay, I had to stop right here real quick. Okay, this scene is great. They look identical, right? So it's not always obvious what scenes are great, what scenes are bad, you know. But when you do see a difference, hey, we'll call it out. This is a great one. Ooh, let me see this one. Yeah, no, looks good to me, right? So we'll run through this, and I'll answer your questions, of course. And got a super chat, Isa Al-Shamsi, yes. Thank you for your generosity from the AED. After the LG G5 update, do you think it's the best all-around TV? Spoiler, I do. Okay, actually, let me take a step back. Before the update, I felt it was the best all-around TV. Now you're asking me, wait, Fomo, why? And I explained it before. This is why. Most people watch TV in a moderately lit room. No light control, meaning they don't turn off the lights. It's not pitch darkness, right? So in a room that's not super bright, but somewhat bright, you're not watching in straight up filmmaker mode. You're normally watching in cinema home. You're taking dynamic tone mapping a little bit brighter, right? You want to see the details. When you do that, all the flaws of the TV are not obvious. And the flaws were, before the update, near black crushing, right? When you do dynamic tone mapping, it raises the blacks. You won't notice the crushing because it artificially makes everything brighter for bright room watching. So for me, non-issue. And more importantly, in a bright room, all QD-OLEDs, S90F, S95F, and the Sony Bravia 8 Mark II is going to have lifted blacks due to the quantum QD-OLED panel technology. That's just how it is. It's going to be slightly brown in the darkest scenes and slightly lifted in even the darker scenes in a bright room. G5 does not have that problem. Now, granted, the S95F does have a very good anti-glare. So there's a case to be made that it's worth the trade-off, right? You don't want the glare, but you're willing to live with a little bit of that color shift. Whereas on the G5, you'll have slight glare, but the blacks are way deeper. I felt on our live streams 2 months ago, at that time, it was the better TV. And that was before the firmware update. Now with the firmware update, well, you'll see for yourself how effective it is. But yeah, it's still my TV of choice all around for most people because most people watch in a brighter room. Now, dark room, reference room, that's for a shootout to determine because now I assume you'll be calibrating your TV, making it perfect, all of that good stuff. That changes things. QD-OLED really rises there. And a medium lit room, well, we're going to get into shadow detail. You guys can decide for yourself if the fix is great or not. But and then the second half of your question, Asa, ISR ratings, SDR color volume, it's the same level with QD-OLED. It's all about image processing though. Oh, I'm gonna stop right here. That one, even though it's a beautiful geisha face that looks animated to me, I'm noticing, again, is it me or does the G5 look more like the BVM3110? I'm just saying. So let me reset the Sony because I gotta make sure my settings are off. What is this? What's happening here? So brightness, that is all correct. High, yep. Let me make sure I reset everything. I didn't push anything by accident. Reset picture settings for professional mode. Okay. It feels like the tone mapping is more accurate on the G5. Let me make sure that it's receiving the HDR signal. Sometimes the splitter does funky stuff. Maybe it's SDR. Nope, it's HDR. Yep. HDR flag. So there's no excuses from the Sony. I don't know what's up. I'm going to have to talk to Sony about this because not only is the color slightly off, the brightness in HDR is slightly off. Maybe I should turn off the TV for a second. Sony, I'm doing what I can, man. I'm trying to help you out here, but the G5 is beating you up in the first 10 minutes of the stream. Oh, so back to your comment, Isa. ISAR ratings SDR color volume. It's the same level with qd-oled. And so beware metrics on a pattern when you have real content like this. And I guarantee you, the Sony on a pattern would have performed differently than what we're seeing in this image right here. Okay, it's slightly brighter, slightly, after turning it off, so that helps. Let's see. But I didn't pause it, so there was no reason for it to dim. Now, I know I turned off all of the dimming algorithms, so let me make sure it didn't turn back on again for whatever reason. Let's see here. Ambient, screens, no, that's not it. Power energy. Yeah, all that's power saving is off. There's just so many of these words. So, yep, power saving is off. Okay. Nope, pixel shift is off. Okay. All right. Just making sure. Thank you for that super chat, Isa. And we have another super chat. ColecoVision. I used to play Coleco as a kid. I actually liked it more than Atari. I'd love to see the same test with dynamic tone mapping, see which one stays more true to the BVM 3110 later in the video. Yes, we will try that when we're doing skin tones. I think the skin tones at the end, that would be great. So I'll keep that in mind, ColecoVision. So dynamic tone mapping on, how close, right? Okay. Osvaldo notices the Sony looks too red. So I think it's actually too magenta. We're going to see that. But it could be a combination red and magenta. Yeah, I agree. I agree. There's something about the Sony. So I'm going to have to do a mea culpa. I thought the G5 at one point, maybe on the live stream yesterday, it looked a little green, but we didn't have the reference monitor. I was wrong. It wasn't too green. The Sony was too red, which makes the G5 look too green. Now with the BVM next to it, it looks very similar to the BVM. Not exact, but closer than the Sony. And this is why we have a reference monitor, right? It's impossible to know which is right or which is wrong unless you have a reference monitor next to it. And in this case, there are scenes where they look very similar, and there are scenes where the Sony's like, oh, it's a little red, there's a little magenta, right? So, you know, what can you do? It's what it is. And this is a great point from Mozart's Ghost, though. So color aside, that can be fixed. Calibration, all that good stuff. What cannot be fixed is what you're saying, Mozart. The gradation, meaning the image processing, right? And the upscaling and the sharpening algorithms and the low bitrate processing. That's the stuff that's unique to the Sony image processor that you can't address by, Calibrator cannot address it. Like right here, the Sony just feels there's something just a touch off. Not enough green. Maybe the green is desaturated here, right? And yep, that's right, ColecoVision. And again, so let me also hit this as well for you guys. Panel lottery is a thing. So this G5 came directly from Value Electronics, out of their, actually it didn't come directly from them, it came directly from the LG local distributor. So I got it through Value Electronics. They ordered it through the local distributor. It came straight from inventory. So I got lucky. I think this actually is a pretty good, oh, and if you're noticing, it's clipping on 3110 because it's brighter than what the 3110 can handle. And so the TVs are now tone mapping. And so you can see tone mapping differences between the TVs. So panel lottery being what it is, some people might get a green shift more than accurate. Some might get a red shift more than accurate. And that applies to the Sony, apparently. I think the Sony is getting a magenta shift that's more than accurate. And so that's why you have a calibrator. And sometimes you get lucky. And I think this G5 ended up being pretty good after the firmware update. So for those of you who have the G5 and notice that the color is a bit more accurate, congratulations. I think what a phenomenal firmware update. Thank you for the super chat, Ray. What would be your first choice if the only criteria is good shadow detail and good presets for dark, bright room without any black crush? What TV, Ray? It depends on the TV. So I will answer your super chat, but every TV is different, honestly. So Ray, Samsung does it slightly differently, Sony does, as well as LG. And if it's specific to the G5, we will go through that today. Or if it's specific to the Bravia 8 Mark II, we will also go through that. But if it's the Samsung, I'll have to tell you what it is without you seeing the TV. I'm waiting for the S95F to come in, so I'll put it up against these two TVs when it does. But until then, we could enjoy this. And SD is on point. So the G5 is focused on making it D65 out of the box, which is what the white point is on the reference monitor. The Sony always does its own thing. They feel like whatever it is, it's more pleasant to the human eye. So if I didn't have the G5 and I didn't have the reference monitor, the Sony would look fine. But I do. And so the problem is we are comparing this to a reference. It doesn't mean that Sony is unpleasant, right? So I don't want to be unfair. But then we also have to recognize that Sony feels like they know better. And that's why people chose Sony for their color science. Whether it's inaccurate or deliberate is something I'll have to ask Sony. But clearly, it's not the same in terms of that white point. But white point aside, it feels the Sony is purposefully slightly dimmer. And you guys know how bright it can get. We saw that on the other day's live stream. So filmmaker mode, I think the EOTF may be slightly dimmer than necessary. So Sony, if you are listening, this EOTF curve here may need an update. I don't mind that you choose a different color because that's your thing, right? But it feels like you're a bit dimmer than the other one, purposefully dimmer. Not the capability of the TV is definitely brighter, but you're purposefully dimming filmmaker mode a touch. For whatever reason, I don't know. Here's a good question, Curmudgeon. Is the G4 almost as good as the G5? So it depends on what you're watching. If it's Netflix, which we will do. So we're going to have some Netflix stuff as well as movies, right? I'll pull out my Kaleidoscape for this. If you're watching just basic movies, streaming, YouTube, other than Jennifer's content, yes, the G4 and G5, so similar you probably won't be able to tell the difference. But if you are a critical viewer and you're watching for color, the G5 does have more color in those scenes that push saturation and luminance higher than normal. So alpha, we're going to have alpha on, you'll see. Alpha is desaturated on the G4. Or some of Jennifer's content is also desaturated. And in sports content, the G5 gets brighter and preserves color. The G4 gets almost as bright, but you're losing contrast and color. But if you're watching old TV shows, Netflix, our favorite Columbo, indistinguishable. So it depends on your content, Curmudgeon, but if you want the latest and greatest low bit rate upscaling, you have to go with the latest TV, whether it's a Sony or an LG. So you have a cable box, let's say, the G5 will likely process the cable box better than the G4 just because it's a newer processor designed to do low bit rate slightly better. Hopefully that helps you. But what would I recommend? 99% of the people get the G4. It's that 1% who are very picky and they want to get their absolute last percentage of performance. You're paying $1,000 difference. I don't know if it's worth it. And Osvaldo says, Sony looking lifeless. Hey, you know what? Maybe there's nothing I can do. This is what it is. I keep on checking the brightness. Like, what's happening here? Yeah, max brightness. And yeah, I don't know. Gradation preferred. Yep. Yeah. You know, maybe we'll have to wait for a firmware update from Sony now. Like this scene, it looks fine. Very similar in this scene. So in some scenes, the Sony does look lifeless. I don't disagree. Can I play the video currently? Yes, Niku. I will tell you what it's called. It's Jennifer Gala's content. Let's just pause right here. It's down here. Dolby Vision 60 FPS complete calibration tool for TVs on Jennifer Gala's channel, right? So go to Jennifer Gala, at Jennifer Gala. Look for this title right here. That's what the thumbnail looks like. Little geisha type lady, right? And it's called Complete Calibration Tool for TVs 4K 60 FPS. There you go. Highly encourage you to watch it, Niku. Oh no, Getty. With his 100-inch Hisense. I just started watching Columbo. Now I'm hooked, thanks to Fomo. I blame you. Hey, now you're going to have to watch Wonder Woman, 70s show, Bionic Woman, $6 Million Man, and the list goes on. Oh, it's an endless supply, my friends. That's awesome. All right, we'll move on to the next one. Yeah, Sony is going on with something's up with the Sony. Maybe the content is triggering the dimming. Is there a watermark anywhere? No watermarks. And you know, I'll try and switch out the cable on the Sony. We'll see what happens. I'll switch the input on the switcher. Sometimes the TVs don't like the switch. So, you know, you just never know. Maybe I'll change the input. How's that? Because some TVs, they're just not switch friendly, or rather splitter friendly, because it is on a splitter. I mean, it's a good splitter, but it's still a splitter. Okay, let's try that input. And I'll plug and unplug the splitter one more time. See what happens. Okay, Sony, you got some fans rooting for you here. And then oh no. Now my 3110 is not reading it correctly. That's what happens when you have a splitter. All right, I think everything looks good now. Okay, maybe the Sony does look slightly better. We'll see. We got a lot more content, but thank you, Mozart. Let's make sure all the TVs are on a level playing field, because sometimes the splitter does do funky things with the different TVs. But yeah, no, the Sony is just slight. Like in some scenes, it's fine. Some scenes absolutely identical, and then in some scenes it's not. And it's that inconsistency that makes me think it's more of the Sony, because if it's consistently not bright, but I think it looks pretty good now, right? Well, you guys tell me. But I do see a slight color difference. Again, this is Sony Science versus reference. If you prefer the Sony color science, nothing wrong with that. But I can say it slightly pushes magenta a touch. Okay, so you guys are noticing that it's similar now. All right, so that probably helped. Pull the plug, switch the inputs, reset the splitter, and they look a little bit closer. Hi, I hate splitters. You, me both, my friend. You, me both. And I want to say this. I agree with Jimmy. If I had any of these TVs to choose from, and I ended up with one, either TV would make me happy, honestly, right? They're that similar. But we're here because you guys just want to see the absolutely last percentage of performance compared to a reference monitor, you're here for it, so we're here. And again, we're going to do the skin tones next. I just wanted to get into HDR impact with you guys real quick. Okay, so let's get your super chats. What would be your first choice? And thank you, Ray, for this. What would be your first choice if the only criteria is good shadow detail and good presets for dark bright room without any black crush? My first choice, the minute you say bright room, I'm leaning away from either qd-OLEDs from Samsung and Sony, and you really end up with the G5. And if it's in a bright room, I'm going to have to raise the shadow detail a little bit. But if your focus is shadow detail, that's really hard, because in a bright room, what we're going to do that. Actually, I will put the Sony in SDR mode for bright room. I will put the LG in Cinema Home, and you guys can compare for yourself and see which one has the better shadow detail. Because now it's not accurate, it's the shadow detail for a bright room, because you want to see that. So we'll test that too. Thank you, Ray. So let me mark that. So you have two things. So you have that, and then you have the dynamic tone mapping as well. Okay. So ColecoVision wants to see dynamic tone mapping, and you want to see that? Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Robert, thank you for the super chat. Do you think the next firmware update for the G... you already jump into the next firmware will address the other presets? Probably. They're doing it one at a time. And of course, Filmmaker is the most important preset. Why is it the most important? So this is so ironic. Most people watch in standard mode, but what do reviewers watch in? Filmmaker mode, or Sony's case, professional mode, as we saw with the ratings review, right? They just keep it in Filmmaker mode or keep it in professional mode. And so to make sure that the reviewers are pleased, the G5 had to get this update in Filmmaker mode out the door. They didn't want to waste another week of bad press. I suspect they will address the other presets as well, but that's my suspicion. No guarantees until it happens, but I think so. We'll ask LG, but yeah. That's my assumption. And you hate Filmmaker. It is not a popular one for a bright room. Now, in a bright room, I would prefer you turn on dynamic tone mapping. Then it's no longer technically Filmmaker. Filmmaker with dynamic tone mapping is more like Cinema Home, with the gamma turned down a notch. Very similar. Ano Dream, thank you for the super chat. Hi FOMO, I'm trying to buy a new TV for a few months now. A few months? No! I need it for movies and TV series. So which one will give me the best picture quality? Fully calibrated. Well, the good news is all of these TVs will look literally indistinguishable once calibrated. So if you're going to get calibrated, then the question is, do you want anti-glare? Anti-glare on the Samsung, well, first of all, it's the only TV that has anti-glare in 2025. Among all the TVs. It is very good. So if you have a little bit of glare, a little sparkle, lights, weird stuff around you, maybe a window in the corner that annoys you, the Samsung may be for you. Very good with anti-glare. Many of my viewers swear by it. They will never go back without it. So in a slightly bright room, anti-glare is pretty good. The problem is in a very bright room, the qd-OLED lifts the black a little bit. So for me, I've been this year, if you don't like anti-glare, go with the S90F. It's the same technology, slightly dimmer, and it's glossy, but in a bright room, now you have glare and lifted blacks. You might as well go with the G5 for slightly more. I say the G5 or the S95F, depending on whether you want the deep blacks with a little glare or slightly lifted blacks but no glare. Those are the two that I would choose. Especially now that I know you're getting a calibration, I'm pretty comfortable that your near black level issues will be calibrated out regardless. So this one's interesting. The BVM, as you can see, is slightly brighter than both of them because the window is larger, right? They can't keep up with the brightness of the BVM, but it's very subtle. And Ray says, what's your secret? Is it your camera for making differences so easy to see on the stream? Well, my secret is I have a good camera. I'm using a Sony FX. Ironically enough, I'm using a Sony FX30 that I've tuned and as you all know, right, and KG's mentioned this, you have to make sure you tune your camera so that it captures it as accurately as possible, because out of the box, the camera sensors are a little off because it's designed to capture real life lighting and real life sunlight, all that stuff. TV is not real life. It has their own unique technologies, and they have little innate color shifts that the sensor picks up that it shouldn't. So you have to tune some of that out. And then there are differences between primary RGB, OLED, and as well as old school W-OLED, as well as the QD-OLED. And we have a mini LED in the BVM3110. And so you have to find this average that kind of hits the middle so you can see the differences. And more importantly, it's all about exposure, right? I always expose for what I'm looking for. So if it's shadow detail, I hyper expose it and I bring it up. So here's let me go into a scene where we can show you an example of that. Here we go. This will be a good one. Okay, so here, everything looks black. And you're saying, wait a minute, is that really black? So if I want to look at how black it is, I will now overexpose everything for you guys, right? Look at that. Oh, magic happens. Okay, here we are. So now you see which TV really is black. And this is realistic ray, as you can see, there's no post anything. It's just my camera changing the exposure, and it's identical to the BVM. The black levels are the same. If one of them has slightly lifted blacks, you would see it when it's hyper-exposed, right? But was that something that just flew by? Was that a moth? But yeah, so that's why playing with exposure is so important to me. Is it allows us to kind of make sure you guys understand, what the playing field is in terms of exposure, and it's all on the same exposure because it's the same sensor being captured at the same time. There we go. And now I'm underexposing, or rather not too under, but exposing for the specular highlights so you can see the brightness levels, right? So when you take the exposure down, you'll then see which TV is brighter. And they're both nailing it. Very similar to the BVM3110. Very close. I'd still like to say the G5 is a touch, ever so slightly, but it's a lot closer than it was before. Okay, and Devram Tor, thank you for that super chat. I'm trying to catch up on the super chats before I jump back in and talk to you guys. Hi Fomo, hope you're fine. I am. I need help choosing between the 65-inch A95L for $2,350, the 65-inch Bravia 8 II for $3,000. It's for watching movies and streaming and PS5. Wow, that's a huge price difference. Get the Sony A95L. Yes, the Bravia 8 Mark II is slightly brighter. Oh, this is a good one. I'm going to stop right there. This is for Sony to see. Sony Corporation to see. Because I feel that the G5 HDR Impact better matches the BVM, and I know for a fact that the Sony on top can handle that brightness, because we go to, it gets, yeah, see professional mode, it's holding back on that peak specular highlight right there in that sun. You guys all see it, right? I don't know why it's holding back there. It's being too aggressive, preserving the color, but losing that brightness right there. And for this generation panel, that's unacceptable. A95L, I saw a little bit of this. The Bravia 8 Mark II is not supposed to do that. So, to answer your question, Devram, get the A95L because I don't see you saying sports. Sports in vivid mode on the Bravia 8 Mark II is significantly brighter. But if it's stuff like streaming and movies and PS5 gaming, I think you're fine with the A95L. And it comes in a 77-inch, so might as well go big. Hopefully that was helpful. And Isa, thank you again for another super chat. For a lot of content, it's under 1,000 nits, right? That is absolutely correct. For when you say a lot, let's say 99% of content. I think I'm comfortable saying for 99% of all content, disc, streaming, Netflix, you name it, other than Jennifer Gala, she's very special. She makes stuff that's 4,000, 5,000, 10,000, but it's for this stuff, right? It's for us to push the TVs. Oh, so here's one I'm going to pause real quick because this is where we see the differences in the red. Sony has that slightly, so in a bright scene, the Sony red feels like it's closer to the reference monitor. Whereas on the G5, that red is slightly more orangish. I don't know if you guys see that, but these are the subtle differences between qd-oled and primary RGB OLED. But the question is that difference enough for you to care? It's there. Do you care? Okay, so yeah, under 1,000 nits, 99.5% of all content. If we activate dynamic tone mapping on TV, which TV has a better picture? So Sony does not have dynamic tone mapping setting per se. And I'm going to do it right now for you to see. What Sony has, and I'll do it for the G5 as well, so gradation preferred is a type of dynamic tone mapping, and it's for accuracy. Brightness preferred is to make it a little bit brighter. So it's one of those two, right? So we go to brightness preferred on the Sony, and then on the LG, they actually do have what's called dynamic tone mapping. And they have various settings, but I'll just do it on rather than go into the professional setting because I think it's actually pretty good. I'm not going to tune it. So dynamic tone mapping off. So on the LG, when it's off, it's similar to Sony's gradation preferred. And then you turn it on. Okay, so you lose even more color saturation, but in a bright room, you get more of the shadow detail, right? And let me take off your super chat so that you can see it. So how does that compare to the reference monitor? The Sony, because of the red, I'm using the red is preserved. On the G5, you lose even more color saturation in the scene. So every scene is slightly different, right? And I know someone asked earlier how they compare, but it's very scene specific. Actually, you go here we go. Like here, it doesn't matter. They look very similar. What you're noticing is on 10,000 nits, right? The shadow detail is slightly lifted on both these TVs with dynamic tone mapping on. So let me turn up the exposure so you guys can see. The back of the bench should be darker, right? Based on what I'm seeing on the reference monitor, but with dynamic tone mapping on, because it's for a bright room, everything is slightly brighter so you could see the back of the bench. If you watch this reference monitor in a bright room, that's going to be too dark because it's meant to be in a reference environment, which is a dark room. So let me turn off dynamic tone mapping. And we're going to do movies with it on so you guys can see later because I know that was one of the requests. But I'm going to turn it off so you can see the difference with it on and off. So here we're turning it off now. This finger. There we go. That was very annoying. Okay, right? It's a little bit darker now. More closely matching the reference monitor. And we'll turn off the Sony's brightness preferred. Oops, wrong one. There we go. All right, back to gradation. See? So suddenly shadow detail is a little bit darker. And it does feel like the Sony shadow detail is a bit too aggressively tone mapped, right? I don't know, maybe because I paused it too long. Let me go back. Because sometimes if I pause too long, some of the TVs will just do their thing. Okay, there we go. There's that scene again. And yeah, the Sony, it feels like it's slightly darker in the scene, just a touch. Okay. There we go. 4,000 nits. Move on. This is some amazing footage, Jennifer. Thank you so much for doing this for us. And here, I can tell the reference monitor is slightly brighter than both TVs, right? So both TVs, the sky is really bright. That means there's not enough energy left to make the specular details bright. So the reference monitor is telling us that these TVs still have a ways to go before they can match the reference HDR scene, but it's close. And next up, Robert, thank you for that super chat. Got home from NorCal yesterday, immediately tested the update. Filmmaker looks like it's been fixed. I love this TV, absolutely beautiful. Agreed, agreed. It's right now in the lead for my favorite OLED TV of 2025. I think Sony Mark II or G5. Talked with a few sellers, told me Sony picture processing is better than G5, so it's better. I understand you think G5 is better. Very scene specific, my friends, and this is why we do what we do. I've told many people before why I like the G5. Look at the HDR impact. Actually, this is the perfect scene to demonstrate that. Look at the leaves right here, right? I'm all about HDR impact. And the Sony doesn't care as much about HDR impact. So I'm going to increase or decrease the exposure a touch, right? Right here, right here. It should be a little bit brighter, and the G5 more closely matches the reference monitor in that brightness, right? To me, HDR impact is what separates today's modern TV from the TV of 10 years ago. And what the Sony does better is if you have a cable box and you have some low bitrate content and you want it to fix up some of those jaggies and macro blocking and pixelation, Sony does it really well. But I have high quality content, right? Gigabit connection, Netflix, yeah, YouTube TV is challenging for sports, and the Sony does do it well. But I think the G5 does it close enough. But for like just good movie impact, HDR impact, which I love, the G5 does it for me. But if you have broadcast TV over the air, you have a lot of bad sources, the Sony does do a good job, because who cares about HDR impact if all you're watching is SDR, news, and sports, right? So it's use case specific. There is no universal TV that's good for everything. And that's why I'm very careful to say, I love the G5 for my use case because I watch a lot of sports. Rooms are bright, right? People are running around, we're eating food, whatnot. That G5 is going to nail it in this room. And it'll fight the glare because of the brightness. But the S95F has anti-glare. None of these TVs do. That is the right TV for many other people. So you really have to look at your use case, Dream. Image processing is one factor, and I think that's an important factor. Like, I don't PC game, so I don't even mention 165 or 144, but that's a big deal breaker for PC gamers, right? Sony doesn't have 144 or 165 capability. That could be a deal breaker for you if you're planning to get like a 5090, right? So, it's definitely use case specific. For me, I do think the G5 is better for HDR impact, bright sports. I'm very specific, and I love its tone mapping, and it's pretty accurate out of the box, as you guys are seeing. So that's not to say the Sony is bad. We got a lot of Sony fans here, right? And now this is a less bright scene. Now they match. But as the specular highlights get brighter, right? So this is what Jennifer does. She has a bright version and a less bright version, and then you see the similarities when it's less bright. It's when you push it beyond the TV's capability that the TVs then make a difference. Okay, so I think we're pretty good. Let's see if there's any other scenes here I want to show off for HDR impact before we get into the skin tones. Like right here, I think all three both TVs match the reference monitor. Look. If you were to come in and say, I can tell that's a Sony, or I can tell it's a G5, you can't. So the Sony's nailing the reference monitor right here. Very similar to the G5. And the G5 and Sony similar to the reference monitor. All right, Hayden, here's a great question. Best 77-inch QD-OLED. Personally, I would choose the Samsung S95F. I like bright TVs for sports that doesn't jeopardize image quality. I believe the Samsung S95F does that. I do have light control, so I can control the lighting a bit to avoid that lifted. Between these choices, I would choose the S95F. And last year, I chose the S95D over the A95L. So I'm just being consistent. You guys know my reference TV last year was the S95D. This year, I'm moving towards the G5 as my reference TV. Doesn't mean the S95F isn't great. I'm enjoying the G5 more this year. So, we could change our minds brand to brand, right? And so for me, let's see, use case, Apple 4K. So Apple 4K has Dolby Vision that you can play with. Samsung, if that's important to you, I'm not saying it is. I don't care about Dolby Vision. I think it causes more trouble than it solves. As a matter of fact, the G5 Dolby Vision arguably could be too dark. Brian's having problems with Dolby Vision. He feels that it's way too dark. So this year, the G5 struggling with Dolby Vision. It needs to be calibrated still. 4K Blu-ray, they all look great in filmmaker mode / professional. So I would choose personally the S95F. I just think it's better all around for my use case than the A95L. And for your use case as well. Even though it doesn't have Dolby Vision. I don't think that's a big deal. And LG Brandon, I love your name, LG Brandon. Sorry, off topic. What LED TV do you recommend between 75 and 85 inches and a budget of $1,700? I'm going to say QM6K. I'm going to say the QM6K. Even though it's under 1,000. The QM7K is brighter. But if you wait till Black Friday, even though it's brighter, I like the QM6K a lot. I think overall, its balance of image quality and color saturation, and it doesn't have the specular highlights of the QM7K, but it's just really good. I would still get a QM6K at 85 inches. If I really need the brightness, I would get the QM7K, but I really like the QM6K. And then with the money you save, get the Sony Quad or get a good soundbar system, right? You're saving maybe $700. You can get a decent soundbar subwoofer match from Amazon. It doesn't have to even be a brand name. Vizio, right? Vizio makes great soundbar subwoofers for under $700. So I think the 85-inch QM6K is $999. So now you have an amazing system. But if you want to spend all of that on the TV, the Bravia, I want to say the Bravia 5 comes close, but I still think it's over 2,000 right now. But the QM6K is just such a good TV at 85 inches. I have the U7K coming in next week. So maybe, or the U7Q. I keep calling it U7K. The Hisense U7Q is coming in next week. And so we're going to compare it to the U7K and the QM8K. The QM8K would be my go-to, but at 85 inches, it's over $2,000. So Black Friday, it'll still be, I think, $1,999 out of your budget. But that would be my ideal 85-inch. How come the reference monitor cannot be a qd-oled? Good question. QD-OLEDs cannot get that bright. So Sony designed this reference monitor to hit at least 4,000 nits on a 5 to 10% window so that colorists can do HDR impact properly, right? Without having to use software to get there. And so qd-oled cannot do that right now. One day it can, for now it can't. And also, you don't have to take care of it. You don't have to worry about burn-in, right? So in the Hollywood studios, they leave their monitor on 24/7. There's no protection or anything. I mean, this thing is a beast. It's got fans, it's got everything. So unless qd-oled is prepared for that kind of environment, the fear of burn-in is real because each of these monitors are like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And you can't buy a bunch of them. Well, if you're a Hollywood studio, maybe you can. But that's why it's not qd-oled. They haven't reached that performance level yet. Maybe the next generation, 5th or 6th generation qd-oled can hit that performance and sustain it for colorists. Because oftentimes colorists have to hold that scene while they're coloring. And if it starts to dim, they're not going to be happy. So it cannot dim at all. But if it isn't dim, is it going to burn in? So qd-oled is still not quite there. Now, there are qd-oled reference monitors, right? Flanders makes one, but it doesn't have that level of brightness. So it's for more traditional monitoring up to maybe 1,000, maybe up to 2,000 peak. But if you need 4,000 peak specular, like mine goes up to almost 5,000, then you have to get the mini LED reference monitor. Hopefully, that clears things up. And KG, hey, welcome. What'd I miss? You actually didn't miss anything. We are going to go into Netflix right now. and we're going to do a little bit of skin tones. So I think we have some conclusions about HDR impact, and I'm going to close out with what the HDR impact is for you, KG, since you just joined us. And that conclusion is, oh, I don't want this to be playing too much. I'm going to get hit with something. All right, we'll pause right here. So, HDR impact. G5, better HDR impact. Not just that, color accuracy closer to 3110. Now, it doesn't mean that the Sony is unpleasant. I think Sony is purposely doing its own white point because it's more appealing. So if you are at Best Buy and you see a Sony and you see a Samsung and you see a LG G5, you might say, oh, the Sony looks better. And so I think they tune it to perceptual taste, but definitely it's not as accurate out of the box as the G5. So even if I tell Sony, hey, it's not accurate, Sony's response may just be, we know better. We think the human eye prefers this, but you can always calibrate it to the G5 and the 3110. It will look identical. So that's always available to you guys, just so you guys know. But yes, G5 out of the box, for me, more importantly, it has the HDR impact. But the question is there that green tint that is distasteful to people? Before the firmware update and in some videos, I noticed there was pushing green a bit, but was it accurate? And did the firmware update change that at all? And so that's where we're looking at right now. Skin tones is the best type of scene to notice green, because slight differences in skin, you guys will see it. Like, boom. You know, that sickly look, you will know. So, Witcher is great because you got some pale skin. And we'll stop right here. Let me turn up exposure for you guys. That is really underexposed. All right, I think that looks close. There we go. Ah, much better. Okay, so good looking guy. We're going to get a close-up of his face shortly, or not. I think her face is better. So she brings her hands down. Come on, come on. Wait, one more, right there. I think I nailed it. Okay. Very close. Yes, the Sony does have a touch of magenta in her skin, just a touch more than the G5, but the G5 doesn't feel as green as it did before the firmware update. So I think they did adjust it slightly, but definitely the G5 does look more like the reference monitor, just a touch, but you see the difference is very subtle. It's not night and day, but it's that Sony tuning on top where Sony's very proud of, whereas G5's like, you know what, we don't have any special colors, we're not doing color psychology with you people, we're just going to match the reference monitor and then call it a day. So, you know, DJ's like, Fomo, go back to the scene with a robot in the spaceship. Maybe later. We ain't gonna get through this, DJ. But you could always rewind, my friend. And hey, any Panasonics yet? They are coming. I can tell you that. They are coming in June, but I don't have it in my studio yet. But I promise you, they are coming. The G5 might give you sunburn, and that's why people buy the G5, right? They need some vitamin D in their life, and boom. And thank you for this reminder. Getty, please smash the like button and subscribe, folks. 380 in chat on a Father's Day. I'm here with all the lonely fathers out there who didn't get a card, but at least they have me. I don't know if I'm a great substitute for brunch with your family, but I'm here for you. All right, let's see. Oh, so dynamic tone mapping, right? So let's see. In this scene, if we turn dynamic tone mapping on, does it change anything? Because I know people are like, oh, what does dynamic tone mapping do to my beautiful faces? So we're going to play with that. Again, Sony doesn't have an on-off dynamic tone mapping per se. Let's turn it on. Ooh, wow. This is why I turn it on in a bright room. Okay. My friends, this is outrageous, right? So the Sony equivalent would have to be like maybe standard, vivid. Okay, so the Sony equivalent is vivid mode, and then I'm going to have to change the picture setting, color, to, yeah, it's cool, that's why. Warm, all right, getting a little bit better. Live color's on high. Let's take it down a notch. Let's turn live color off. All right. And it's a bit too contrasty for my taste. Okay. Okay. Well, again, it's vivid mode. Let me turn down the, and so as you can see, this is just way, but that's what dynamic tone mapping does, right? Okay. Now look how much brighter it is than reference when you turn on dynamic tone mapping. So on the LG, you just turn it on and boom, it gets that bright. On the Sony, you have to go to vivid mode. And then in vivid mode, okay, so I have to say this for Sony. They do a great job tone mapping everything in. And on the LG dynamic tone mapping, you lose a little bit of the cloud detail, which is fine because you just care about a bright room, right? You don't care about the cloud detail. So Sony's still preserving some of that detail. Obviously the color's off. It's vivid mode. So if you do get it calibrated and you love the vivid bright look, have them calibrate vivid mode. But then will it still be as bright? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. But at least this gives you a match in terms of the brightness of the scene. I think is very similar right now. So let me turn this off before you guys, oh my God, the LG is terrible. Look at it. So we'll just turn it back off and you'll see the brightness difference. So that's dynamic tone mapping on, and now we turn it off. Right, see, just like the reference monitor. And the Sony, we'll take it off of vivid. Here we go. Okay, let me see. I think there's another part of this scene where we have a slight, oh, here's a good one. Close up here. All right, she has more color in her skin. See, they look very similar, but it feels like there is more magenta in her face on the Sony than on the G5. Let's go to him. Ah, there you go. Yeah, so many would say, oh, maybe the LG looks a little bit, okay, actually, they're very similar. I think I overexposed it a bit. They're actually more similar because when you overexpose it, it looks a bit more white than it's supposed to, I think. Okay. All right, this is more accurate. And yeah, the G5 does look a touch more similar to the BVM, but you see, the Sony isn't unpleasant, it's just not the same. And some people prefer that flush look. So I'm going to swap over to, it's no longer HDR impact, look at me. It's all wrong. Skin tones, we're still on skin tones. There we go. All right. Give me a minute here. Okay. This will be fun. Okay. Oh, no, not shadow detail. We are going to do some skin tones first. There we go. This is a great one. Last Voyage of the Demeter. Pale faces. Yeah, that's my scene. Oh, I look forward to this one, guys. Yeah, I know you guys are seeing the color differences. I am too. We'll start with this. So, let me get more brightness in. That's not as good as this next. So neither TVs are completely accurate, but the G5 actually matches the BVM a touch more. I'm going to pause right there. Get closer. Okay. I'm going to turn up the exposure a touch. Okay, so at first, when I saw this, I go, wait, is the G5 too green? It actually isn't. So this is where my sensor is actually picking up a bit too much green. It is more similar to the BVM than you guys think. The Sony is also very close. So the G5 has just a slight, I mean, it's nearly unnoticeable of green, and the Sony has a slight red magenta push. So it's like the lesser of two evils, right? Neither are completely accurate compared to the reference. But it feels like the G5 white point is just like the BVM. So look at the background. And I think the best way to do that is we'll start with a window, the opening window scene, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Right there. Okay. So the white point of that window, the Sony does have a touch more magenta, right? You notice that? And so based on that compared to the BVM, you'll see the skin tones act accordingly. So hopefully that helps you. That's why I wanted to pause there. And this is where the sensor issues, this is where Classy, and I agree with him, ideally you have two cameras, one camera adjusting for the green sensitivity on the G5, and the other camera, and the Sony matches perfectly. This is exactly what I see on the Sony and the BVM, but I think the G5 has a touch more green than I expected in comparing it right now. It was greener before the firmware, but now it's much better, but the sensor doesn't capture that. So you just have to listen to me on that one. And Bravia 9, hey Mozart, his observation is the Bravia 9 pushes red too, but it's cleared up with calibration. And that's another thing. These things are so subtle. I guarantee you with calibration, they will look fine. It's out of the box. And that's what we're doing out of the box right now. And AJ says the Sony looks better. Yeah, mostly also because my sensor makes it a little bit greener than it should. So I feel bad for the G5. It's not, maybe it's a Sony camera. Maybe I should have gotten a LG camera. LG, if you make a camera built for qd-oled, it'd be so much easier on me. Okay, so I think we're done with the skin tones. Let's go to HDR impact real quick since we're here. So we'll move back to HDR impact. Oh, there we go. Oop, wrong one. Okay. We'll do shadow details. HDR highlights. Okay, I think this is the one. Everyone's favorite pan. This is quite aged by now, but still almost relevant. I think we've surpassed the capability of the scene. And both TVs look really good in the scene, by the way. But we'll start off with the standard. Oh, I gotta turn down the exposure here. And we're almost there. Boom. Okay. Okay, the peak brightness is exactly the same on both TVs. Yeah, neither one brighter than the other. Actually, you know what is brighter? It's the reference monitor. So the TVs have the same brightness. They tone map exactly the same to the scene, but neither TV is able to get as bright as it could get, right? Because, come on, they cannot hit 4,000 nits in Filmmaker or Professional, but close. They're about a stop behind the reference monitor. So that's that scene. Everyone happy? Let's move on to the next one. This one is not really relevant for OLED, but I'll show it anyway, because everyone's asking, hey, how does it look with the hat and shadow detail? Oh, actually, this is an actual very good scene for shadow detail comparison. Let's drop the exposure. Right. Still not bright enough. Okay, I think that will do it. Okay, so it feels to me that the Sony is a touch lifted. I don't think in this scene the G5 is crushed, because look at the reference monitor. If you didn't have a reference monitor, you would say, oh, look, the G5 is crushing, right? No, the reference monitor, also the cheek is a bit dark. And this is where I recommend that if you're sensitive to lifted blacks and you don't need the extra detail, if you adjust, I'll tell you how to adjust on the Sony, if you happen to have a Sony, because this works really well on the Sony. This is what I would do. Go to brightness, go to gamma, and you'll see the magic happen. -1, -2, and there you go. So at -2, it more closely matches the G5 and the reference monitor. And this has been something that Sony's been doing for the last 2 years now. On my A95L, I had to take it down -2 to match reference. On the Bravia 9, I have to take it down -2 to match reference. But in a bright room, set to 0, it's great because you see the shadow detail, but it's not necessarily reference. So now that I have the Sony kind of matched at -2, it still feels a little bit slightly lifted in the shadow detail, right? Just a touch compared to the reference monitor. So that's it. Oh, wait, but that's not HDR impact. That's shadow detail black level. Gotta make sure I have the right label for you guys. It'll be easier for me to find too, right? Okay, let's go to the next scene. Where's my remote? Here we go. Oh, alpha. Gotta take down that one. It's gonna be way too bright. Okay. Go. You know what? Let's skip this one. Let's go to this one. Okay. And yes, there is a slight magenta hue in the clouds on the Sony. That is not on the BVM, and that's not on the G5. And that's why I was mentioning, I think there is a magenta red push here that shouldn't be there. And you guys see it in the clouds. Now, let's look at the tone mapping. The tone mapping in the G5 is much improved. On the G4, there was a little bit of clipping of color and detail, but not on the G5. Now, of course, I did the G4 way back when. They may have improved that since then, but definitely on the G5, they nailed it. And it's brighter, right? That brightest part of that scene on the G5 is half a stop brighter than the Sony, matching almost matching the reference monitor. The reference monitor is about half a stop brighter than the G5, and the G5 is half a stop brighter than the Sony. So I hope you guys can see that. Yeah. Okay. What do you guys think? And this is what I love. Thindus has the best comment. On one scene, I prefer Sony, but then the next one, the LG. You see, my friends, no TV is perfect. You choose the TV that fits, and maybe you just don't like the magic finger, and you're going to get this. Look at that. I'm just shaking this thing. This thing's popping up everywhere. Or maybe you need a backlit remote and you get the Sony and pay $80 for that backlit option. So I absolutely agree with Fendez. There are some scenes where I'm like, you know, I don't care if the Sony's not accurate. It looks somehow a little bit better. And in some scenes like this one, they look identical, but I prefer the G5's accurate clouds because I do notice that smoky sky, a little bit too smoky. Is this the last HDR impact scene? Let's see. Well, that's another good one. Right there. Yeah, I mean, the G5 really hits you hard. The Sony's not that far behind, and the A95L is farther behind. And this is why I say the Bravia 8 Mark II is better than A95L. A95L is about a full stop, if not a stop and a half, behind the G4. So, yeah, the Bravia 8 is doing a great job, as well as the G5 in this scene. Let's move on to the next one. Let's see if I have anything else. Nope, not that one. Oh, we'll go back to shadow detail. So this is a problem. And I'm not going to tell you which one is the problem, but this is a problem for one TV. All right, let me turn up the exposure here. Oh yeah, okay. So we have a reference monitor. And the G5 doesn't exactly fully fix the black crushing. That shadow detail is lost on the G5 right there. So as you guys saw, we have the firmware update. This scene, you're going to have to turn dynamic tone mapping on. You're going to have to do something. I mean, everything else appears to be there, like on the to the right, and then the clouds look great. I mean, the clouds look phenomenal, but and then we'll keep on going to the scene. You guys will see. This is not too bad. Okay, right here. I'm going to pause. Okay. So the Sony is slightly lifted. And remember, I made the adjustment on the Sony to take it down, -2, right? But it's still slightly brighter than reference. But the G5, you've lost some detail. You know, the fire is there, the flames are there, the army is there, but in the distance, there's some detail you're losing. So what Sony, I see, is doing is they're giving you that detail, even though it maybe not be accurate. They feel like, you know what, I want to give you something. And the G5 cannot resolve this. I mean, it's there. I think I have to turn my exposure a bit higher than this to see if you guys can even see that. I mean, it's there, but I really have to take the exposure up a bit, right? But the detail isn't there. Like, yeah, you see something there. So let's move on to the next one. I'll pause right here. Okay. All right. So again, the Bravia 8 is more similar to the reference, and the G5 is just a little bit darker on the left, just a little bit, right? So I think there's still some work to be done in shadow detail on the G5, and this is why in these scenes, it's not perfect. It's a little bit darker. It's better than before, but I think this is more of what I see right here. It's not that, yeah. So I can live with it, but it's not perfect. Okay. John, I will buy the 75-inch reference monitor. Unfortunately, this is as large as it gets, 32 inches. And just imagine, at 32 inches, it's heating up my room. It's got 2 active fans constantly blowing because I have it set to the 4,000 nit level. And it's, you know, handles everywhere. The thing is like 60 pounds for a 32 inch. Can you imagine what a 75 inch would do? Not to mention the price. Oh, goodness. You guys noticing that magenta too? I thought it was just me. You see on the Sony there is that magenta shade. At first I thought it was just me. Now that I'm looking on the monitor, it's there. It's not just my eyes. So this is definitely needs to be fixed. I think I lost the panel lottery on the Sony right there. That is proof that I have a magenta problem. Right above the horse rider, right? You guys can see it right here. There's definitely some magenta going on. And I don't know if it's a panel lottery, many of you won't have this. And if it's not, I'm gonna have to have a talk with Sony about this. So, oh, again, label is wrong. It's not HDR. It's impactful, but it's not HDR. Shadow detail. I keep on labeling this darn thing wrong. Okay, but anyway, so yeah, look, imperfections everywhere. The G5 is a little bit too dark. The Sony's got that weird magenta shade, like ice cream pink, and the reference monitor is like, what the heck is happening over here? Like, what's wrong with you guys, right? So no perfect TV exists. Now, would calibration fix this? I believe so. The calibration would remove the magenta on the Bravia 8 Mark II, and on the G5, you can raise the black levels and adjust the contrast accordingly. Now, how close will it get to the BVM at the end of the day? I don't know, but I know it can mitigate some of these issues. -2 gamma, you think so? Okay, let's bring the Sony gamma back out. So here we are. Okay, we are at 0 gamma. And yeah, now it's an even brighter pink, right? So for sure it's too bright. But yeah, I don't think the gamma does add or take away, but good try high def. So we fixed that. The gamma is not adjusted anymore on the Sony. We're back to 0, but as you can see, it's a bit bright now on the Sony. So it's either too bright out of the box with no adjustments or too dark. And I think the LG may be dimming over time. So let's try this scene again. Let's restart this scene. So they have a chance to reset. I don't want them to be dimming and then indict them for its dimming over time algorithm. Oh, look at that magenta beauty, guys. Come on. But it's hyper exposed. It's not that obvious. Just letting you guys know, I don't see it as badly as you guys see here. I'm hyper exposing the scene so you guys can see the shadow detail. But by hyper exposing the scene, you're also hyper exposing the magenta tint. But you can see the G5 is pretty crushed. Well, not crushed, too dim. The details are there. It's just a lot dimmer, right, than reference. And to demonstrate that the details are there, I'll just raise the ISO again, and you guys will see. You see, the details are all there. It's just the way LG graded that luminance, it's too dark, but the details are all there. That means that they just need to raise that luminance a bit more to match the reference monitor. And for the Sony, just shift some of that weird magenta stuff that you guys can see here. But if I take it down to what is the right brightness, what you guys should normally be seeing, which is more like this. Okay. Oh my goodness. Why does it look so dark? That's not how it looks at all. I think YouTube is making the G5 look worse than it is. I was like, wait, I can't see a thing. Okay, that's about what it looks like. So you know what? Again, no. Looks like the G5 is pulsating. Yeah, it's because the camera sensor, the frame rate, you know, I'm sorry, it happens. At this point, you're reaching the limits of my technology. So it's now my camera that's actually causing the pulsing, not the TVs. At a lower frame rate, you're going to see these pulsing. At a higher frame rate, you'll see it. So, okay, let's see what we got left here. Shadow detail, HDR impact. What do I have left? Skin tones are done. Oh, yeah. You guys want to see what dynamic tone mapping does in this case? Let's do it. So, you know, you're in a bright room. You got this terrible scene. You can't see a darn thing, right? So I'm going to turn on dynamic tone mapping on the LG G5 and let's see if it fixes things, right? I'm not going to change anything on the Sony, just so you have something to compare it to, because the Sony only has brightness preferred, which I honestly don't like at all. Okay, and look, voila. Dynamic tone mapping on, and in a bright room, you're going to see more detail. That's dynamic tone mapping on. The G5, it's on. So I will turn the exposure down a little bit more, and then you can see why you turn it on in a bright room. I prefer to have dynamic tone mapping on in a bright room in filmmaker mode because you get to see all the detail, right? So the Sony is a little bit brighter than normal. The G5 is definitely brighter than normal with dynamic tone mapping on, and the BVM represents reference. That's how dark it's going to look in a bright room. And so when people watch this scene, Game of Thrones, last season, episode 3, oh my gosh, it's so dark. That's because the room is so bright, right? Your eyes are adjusting, your rods are like, or cones are like, I can't see anything because it's so dark. And so dynamic tone mapping allows you to see the detail. That's all. All right, so let me see what else is left. How much time we got here? I've been out for almost 90 minutes. Man, time just flies. So we will go back to, well, let's see if any super chats I missed. I think I missed a lot. So let me put it back on YouTube and let it play for you guys. I think I've got through all the quality content. Yeah. Oh no, since we're on shadow detail, I'm going to show you the fix that was on extraction. I think that's going to be worthwhile. And then we'll answer questions. I know I got a bunch of super chats to have to catch up on. So thank you for your patience, everyone. And happy Father's Day to everyone who's spending time with me, because no one else cares about your hobbies but me. Fathers have hobbies that the wife and kids are like, what, really? You gonna watch that guy? Well, fine, we're gonna go shopping. Give me the credit card. Okay. Extraction. I think it'll be in the right scene immediately. Okay. Okay, let me turn up the exposure. And did I turn dynamic tone mapping on? I gotta make sure, like, wait, it looks kind of bright. Did I leave it on? Did I turn it off? I gotta double check. Yep, it's on. I was wondering, hey, that looks a little bit bright. Okay. Okay. Oh, as you can see, the specular highlights match very well on the G5, but to the left of his ear, it's just slightly darker, but it's not terrible, right? I still think the G5 in this scene is closer to the BVM. The Bravia 8 Mark II, if you leave it at 0, it's just way too bright. But it's okay. In a bright room, you want it at 0. But in a darker room, you want reference, take your gamma down -2. Oh, actually, let's try this one. His next scene has a lot of detail. Okay. So the reason why the Sony color looks off is because it's a bit lifted. It shouldn't be that bright, but it is. But again, in a bright room, you'll be thankful. But in reference viewing conditions, I don't know. That's a bit 2 points too high. So my conclusion is the G5 out of the box, its luminance level in these scenes are more accurate than the Sony. But in a pure dark scene, where everything is shadow detail, like what you saw on Game of Thrones, it's too dark, and the Bravia 8 Mark II is definitely too bright. But the Bravia 8 Mark II, you could adjust it by taking gamma down 2 points. The G5, there's nothing you can do. I played with the black levels, it looks worse. You have to just leave it as is. and then hope for a firmware update. Taking the black ovals up does not look good. But if there's any light in the scene, like here, it looks fine, right? Yeah, so I think now we're done with all the comparisons. And we'll bring you back to HDR impact and our good friend YouTube. And I'll answer questions. I know you got a lot of questions. And there are, okay. There we go. Okay, my friends. Oh, I gotta love the vibrant colors. Okay, that's what we got. And thank you for the super chat. Fomo, is Sony still better at image processing than G5? Yes and no. You saw the comparisons. It depends on the scene. It's really hard for me to do, actually, you know what? Let's do it right now. Actually, I can do this. Sony's strength is low bitrate upscaling, and for that, we'll use YouTube TV. And this is where it gets risky, because as you know, YouTube TV's got some very aggressive sports brands out there, namely NFL, NBA, and let me see. Let's see here. I know, I'm playing with fire. What is this, Jacksonville Jaguars? What is this? And we're going to take the bit rate down a notch. Actually, let me see. Is that good? Not really. How about US Open? Live from the US Open. Let's do that one. Because you got grass. There's more detail in the US Open grass than there is with the fast-moving. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause right there. I'm going to put them in standard mode because or sports, right? So we'll do the G5 in sports mode because no one watches sports in Filmmaker. Come on, let's be realistic. Sports, and the Sony, something similar would be Vivid. I recommend watching sports in Vivid. Standard, there we go. Vivid's very similar now. And I know I put the Sony on warm in Vivid, so we'll match that with the sports. So at least they have a similar color temperature. And of course, don't even look at the reference monitor. It's just like, what's happening with you people? What's happening here? All right. Let's see if I can do something here. Oops. Close enough. All right. Okay. I just want the brightness to be similar. And then we'll turn off the reference monitor because it's not designed. If it sees SDR, it's just going to go to like 100 nits and won't be bright enough. Or it'll have the wrong color space. Okay, so what we're looking for is sharpness, clarity, resolution, and all of that, right? And this is a great one. This Rolex, the words, the letters, I'm looking at the contrast and everything. They're very similar, right? I'm looking at US Open round 4. Is it legible? And it feels like, you know what? Let me put the Sony. It feels a little bit too warm still to me. I'm going to put on neutral. Okay, that's better. All right. So, and remember, the G5 scoring in resolution, upscaling, processing trades blows with the Sony. It's the Samsung that's a far step behind both. So I think both TVs are very similar. So when people say that the Sony has better image processing than G5, I don't know who's saying it. I don't think it does. So I want to be very clear. It's very close. They're going to trade blows. Because I've seen some scenes where the G5 felt like maybe skin tones. Here we go. Okay, let's try that. Oh, what? I just lost it. Okay, there we go. Actually, that image of that girl, that's why I wanted to go back, was great. Okay, let's see if I can catch it. Okay, all right. So this is where people complain in the various modes. Okay, so the Sony wants to preserve skin tones, even in vivid mode, right? And the LG in sports mode, so I can play, you could, it doesn't have to be sports, we can try different modes. But in its search for brightness, you lose some color saturation. What's happening? Feels like it's not changing at all. Okay, let me turn off I think I pushed the remote too frequently, the G5s. It's like, wait, give me a break. All right, let's try that again. Okay. So it's in sports mode. Oh, yeah, much better. Okay, so expert bright. Okay, so if you want skin tones, you have to put the LG in expert bright, and it gets bright, right? So let's do that if we're going to look at skin tones. So you have to play with it because they have a lot of presets on the G5 that you'll have to be familiar with. Whereas in the Sony, it's really just three. You got vivid or standard and filmmaker or professional. Vivid, standard, professional, right? Calm and cinema. Cinema is like an alternate calibration mode that you can play with, but cinema is very similar to professional, and calm just means it'll be very dim because you want to feel calm. So the real changes are vivid, standard, and cinema/professional, whereas LG has a lot of different modes. So I have an ISF professional bright that gives you a bright scene with some skin tones in a warmer setting, right? So, but as far as to answer your question, Dwight, in Vivid, the Sony looks clearer. So it's focused on like the letters on her shirt. I'm going to turn up the exposure, yes, and see that. But that's because I have an ISF, right? Okay. I'm turning up the exposure so we can see that shirt a little bit better. Okay, I think standard is a good match. Okay, we'll leave it on standard. I think standard is good. I think sports is kind of not so good on the LG. So in standard mode, it still feels, they're very similar. Maybe her eyes are a little bit sharper on the Sony, maybe. It's very subtle. It's not, I would not make a decision based on this scene. So I don't think the differences are that drastic. Okay, Getty. U8QG has a teal tint. Now the G5 is its QC issue. So I think the G5 firmware updates are actually pretty good. And as more firmware updates roll out, I think the G5 is going to get better and better. The issue is Hisense does not roll out firmware updates frequently. But we will see. I will have the U8Q out again in a week or two against the QM8K. And we'll see if the teal tint is still there, if there's a firmware update. Gimpy G Gaming, thank you for that super chat. Your content is awesome. It helps me tons. You're welcome. I heard Jennifer's YouTube has some Dolby Atmos. Is this true? Yes, it is. Jennifer Gala has Dolby Atmos demos. Definitely check it out. It'll actually say Dolby Atmos. Dolby Atmos, yes. Highly recommended. You can play with your Atmos system using her content. Right, Dwight, which is better at upscaling? Both are highly rated for upscaling. So let's do that. Let's just take it down a notch and give you lower resolution content. Let's go down to 720p. I think that's reasonable. I think 480p is too terrible to try and upscale. All right, I think we're at 720p now. Wait, here we go. What's happening? Here, let's try this. Okay, while that's playing, let's put it on 720p. Oh, it is on 720p. Okay, so on 720p enhanced, whatever that means. And I'll just pause right here. No, right here. Okay, how's it doing? I don't see any problems on either one. They both look pretty good to me. Let's move on. So this is 720p being upscaled. I'm looking at the letters and everything. I'm looking at their faces, looking for macro blocking, looking at the back of the jersey. They all look very similar. Let's take it down even lower. Let's take it down to 480p, see what happens. Okay, we're at 480p now. I'd say the G5, there's more resolution on the bottom, or rather, there's more clarity. It's sharpening a little bit better. I mean, but this is just so close. They both have a lot of artifacts as it's such a low resolution. The back of his shirt, and everything looks very, they look very similar. Maybe the contrast on, okay, so this is all software now, right? It's SDR. What they have to do is play with the contrast in whatever algorithm they're using to bring out the clarity. I think the G5 might be doing it a touch better because I see the jersey, the back of the jerseys, the red jerseys specifically, the white letters feel like they're a little bit brighter. But then it's 480p, you could barely see it. So if I change it back to what you probably would normally see, which is 720p, maybe. Actually, let's try 720p normal, not enhanced. All right. Okay, 720p, yeah, there's much more clarity there. Let me double check. Yeah, 720p is not enhanced. I'd be hard pressed to choose either TV based on this. So they're both good. How's that? Don't make a decision based on that. I'd take the G5 because it's brighter though. In a bright room, this will get brighter. Can you please compare something that would actually use in a relatively bright room? Cinema Home on LG versus Dolby Vision Bright on Sony. Shadow detail and overall. So Dolby Vision Bright on the Sony. Yes, actually, I can do that. Funny you should ask. We will do that right now. So we have this scene right here. We're going to have Netflix. I have just the scene. We're going to do extraction again. Okay, oh, there it is. Extraction to, there it is, extraction. Let's find a good scene where we could have, was it Dolby Vision Bright on the Sony? So this is a turbo scene for Dolby Vision Bright. Let's get some action here. Actually, maybe, let's do this scene. Okay, we're going to turn on, it's a Netflix calibrated. Let's do Dolby Vision Bright. So we'll turn Netflix calibrated off. And Dolby Vision bright. Okay, so now we have Dolby Vision bright. On the LG, what was this timestamp? 104:39. Okay. Oh, it's HDR. 1 second. Let me go back. Let me see if it can convert it to Dolby Vision while on a splitter. If not, I'll have to plug it in directly. I might get lucky. Oh, okay, I have to plug it in directly. Give me a minute, guys. Ooh, wrong one. Dolby Vision, yes. Okay. Let me take this subtitle off. Okay. Let's go back to here. Oh, look at that, I nailed it. Okay, so I'm so proud of myself. Dolby Vision bright on top. On the bottom is Dolby Vision. Let's put it on Cinema. Okay, Cinema Home. Okay, it is on Cinema Home right now. So let me turn up the exposure a bit so you guys can see this a little bit better. Okay, we are in Cinema Home. They look very similar. Sony might be arguably a touch brighter in the shadow details, right? Okay, I think you guys can see that a little bit better now. Okay, so Sony on Dolby Vision Bright is slightly brighter than the G5 in Cinema Home. Now, if you need it brighter than Cinema Home, what are our options here? Oops. Vivid, oh my goodness, yeah, that's a bit much. I think standard, yeah, Cinema Home's more accurate. Let's see what we can do with advanced settings. I'm trying to just match it to the Sony. So it's a touch darker if that's a problem to you. Then you could always turn, is there anything I can turn on? No, not much. Expression enhancer maybe. Let's turn brightness up. See what that does. Okay, expression enhancer is on. Sony is still a touch brighter. So Dolby Vision bright on the Sony in the scene is slightly brighter overall with more lifted shadow detail, especially under the lights right here. So this is where you're going to notice it. Right here, right under the lights here, This is a little bit darker, this is a little bit brighter. So in a bright room, you might prefer the Sony because that will actually kind of darken a bright room. But you know, it's to taste. Hopefully that answers your question. All of that for a super chat. Happy Father's Day, Ray. Any word on the release date of the Panasonic TV? Yes. I believe it will be the end of June. Exactly the date, we're not sure yet, but you're going to hear some news by the end of June. And Vasilios. Oh, and by the way, my Amazon order that had the quote-unquote mistake for the Z95B at, was it, $1,400, and they promptly took it off. It's still ready to go. So I'm hoping maybe they will ship it for $1,400. I think the TV is going to launch at above $2,000. Yet Amazon put it out for $1,400, and many of you got it for $1,400. So we'll see. We'll see if I get that TV. Vasilios, hey FOMO, love the content. Just moved houses. Need to put my A95K, which I adore, into another room. I have the A95K in my bedroom. Is the Bravia 8 Mark II a worthy upgrade? Price, no issue. It is definitely brighter. If you need brighter sports, yes. As far as image quality, they're very similar, especially if you watch stuff like this, right? Just regular moody movies, you're not going to notice the difference at all. It's in the brighter specular highlights. The HDR impact, it will be slightly better, but sports will be brighter. Vivid mode is definitely brighter. So if you don't watch sports and you're watching mostly old TV shows, I would rather you upgrade for size, right? So get the 77-inch A95L. That immersion will be the upgrade you want. Not necessarily the image quality unless you're looking for brighter sports. I think we're almost caught up. Here we go. Last one, Dwight Baldwin. Have you considered doing a comparison of external streaming devices for picture quality and also compare it to native TV? So the last time we did this, and this was probably last year sometime, and Classy really dove deep in this, and we talked about this at length. That's why I didn't do it. The native apps generally do not perform as well as the Apple TV version of the app. So Apple TV has the best version of any app, whether it's YouTube TV, Netflix, whatever, right? Apple TV nails it better than the default version that's on your TV. As a matter of fact, some TVs are a lot worse than others. But the benefit is this. And as you can see on the Sony, its native version has this Netflix calibrated mode. Off, on, right? So you have that. And also on the Sony, the Prime Video has its own Prime Video calibrated mode. And so TVs have their own special modes with the native app. However, if you want to turn off Dolby Vision, you can't. It's what it is. And that's, for me, that's a problem. Oftentimes Dolby Vision does not perform well. Sometimes it's too dark. So, and that's on Dolby Vision, not necessarily the TV. It's on like the TV and the Dolby Vision working together. Fire TV, I'd say, is right up there. So you have Apple TV, then Fire TV, but the native apps of the TVs themselves, more often than not, are dead last. But that was last year. Who knows, right? Year to year, things might change. And when we say it's dead last, we're talking about bitrate. Sometimes the bitrate difference doesn't even show on screen. That's something else to keep in mind. Just because the TV has a lower bitrate for that streaming, if it still looks great and you can't tell the difference, what does it matter? So that's something I always like to remind people. Okay, let's wrap up your questions. We're going to be good, guys. You know what? Before I wrap up with the questions, let me bring all of the stuff that we tested today and talk about it one by one, and then we can close out with any last questions I haven't answered. So, HDR impact. I am so impressed by, oh, you know what? Now that we're back on, oh wait, I was going to turn on the reference monitor, I realized I unplugged the splitter so I can plug it directly in the G5. Never mind. So we had the reference monitor earlier to compare HDR impact, skin tones, and shadow level when accuracy is important. I felt that HDR impact, the G5, had the best both color accuracy, shocker, and HDR luminance impact as required by the content. We used Jennifer Gala stuff. Thank you, Jennifer. Let's put back some Jennifer Gala stuff, if I can find it, on these TVs. that now that it's like completely different scenes, right? Oh, I forget. Let me see, where am I? Oh, look, I could watch myself. That'd be terribly disturbing. You know what? Why not? Right? So let me just watch me. Oh, that's too bad. Can't do it. Can't do it. Okay, let's go into the library. Yeah, just something random. Okay, these are all Jennifer Gala content stuff. And of course, it's on the free version. Okay, got off topic. HDR impact. G5 wins in both accuracy and HDR impact. Accuracy, though, is not a big deal because more often than not, it's to taste unless you care about reference out of the box. If you do, G5 is more accurate. If you don't, then the Sony is fine. Sony has its own color science that it feels is better, I believe, is what their position is going to be. They don't necessarily tune to the reference monitor for the common consumer, but if it's important to you, you're going to have to get a calibrator for the Bravia 8 to make it exactly D65 compliant. If it's not important to you, that's fine. If it is, the G5 out of the box is closer to D65. Is there a green tint on the G5? It is no longer noticeable. If you go back and you watch some of these scenes, wait, how come I see a green tint? My camera appears to be a little bit sensitive to the green tint, so it's making it more green than it is. It's actually more like the BVM 3110 than the Sony. My Sony definitely has a bit of a magenta push. There's an issue there, and I don't think that's meant to be there. So it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to choose a different white point. I get it. But that magenta aberration, I'm going to tell Sony. So I think that could be a panel lottery. Now, in these scenes, it looks great. It's only visible in monochromatic scenes where it's gray clouds, right? Light gray, that's when you'll see it. Colorful scenes, not an issue. But regardless, on balance, the G5 is my HDR impact TV. It's in the lead. We'll see how S95F does, but right now, that G5 nails it. Skin tone, same thing. I think the G5 skin tone, shockingly, I like it. Now, there are some scenes where the Bravia 8 looks good, but when it looks good, I think it's a match to the G5. It's not necessarily the G5 looks bad. G5 still looks like the reference monitor. It's just the Bravia 8's doing its own thing. You might find it pleasant, but the G5's still more accurate in skin tones. I prefer it. Now, shadow detail black level. I think the G5's struggling here. It's better before the firmware, right? After firmware 33.11.35, the G5 is still struggling with shadow detail. It's still too dark. Now the Sony out of the box is a little bit too bright, but you could take it down -2 gamma and it's very close to the reference monitor without affecting anything else. So I think Sony purposely has it a little bit brighter out of the box so you can see shadow detail when you're watching in a bright room, right? But if it's reference you want, take your gamma down -2 and that's fine. G5, there's nothing you can do. That's what it is in filmmaker mode. And right now, I think they need to address that next. So overall, though, the G5 is still my preferred overall best OLED TV for everyone. It has a little bit of everything. Now, the one thing you need to remember is neither remote is backlit. This one's got a little finger, that little pointer thing that just bothers me greatly. If you're okay with it, great. Shouldn't determine whether or not you get the TV. With the Sony, at least you can pay an extra 60, 70 bucks and get a backlit option. The G5 does not come with a stand. I have a stand on mine. I'm using the Sanus stand, and I love the Sanus stand. This is why, right? I have to show this off. I didn't even know it did this. You can turn it. Ah, look at that. I love the way you can turn it, right? So this Sanus stand allows you to do this. For me, this makes it so much easier for me to adjust it to my cameras. So the Sanus stand, I linked it below. I think it's like $169. Definitely better than the G5's stand. So if you need to get a stand, I highly recommend the Sanus one. Or if you order from Robert's Value Electronics, ask for the Fomo deal, he'll throw it in as part of the Fomo deal, right? So just ask him for that. Because remember, the G5 does not come with a stand. It comes with a wall mount. And the reason why They said that people request the wall mount more than the stand, so they're just going to get rid of the stand. It's just what it is, the realities of economics, right? Now, I think that's a good wrap up. So the next comparison we're going to do is QM8K versus Bravia 9 versus U8Q. Oh, actually, no, before that, U7Q, Hisense U7Q versus QM7K, and we'll see how those two compare. And then after that will be the Bravia 9 and the QM8K, and we'll see how the U8Q does against them. I don't think it'll do that well, because the color accuracy is a bit off. That teal tint you guys saw. And we got some super chats to wrap up our stream. Thank you, thank you. So let's see what we got. Hector Saldana, thank you, my friend. Did Brian ever get asked for an LG on why Dolby Vision is so dark? No, they're working on it. Well, the answer is, oh, thank you, Brian, for letting us know. We'll address it in a future firmware update. So they are aware, but they haven't addressed it. And as far as the reason why, they'll never tell you why. They'll just say, oh, thank you for letting us know. We'll fix it. How is motion? Oh, how is motion? I don't think motion has been an issue on either of these TVs. So unless you have a specific issue, motion on the G5 and the Sony by this generation or by the last generation is completely fixed. There is a setting that solves all problems depending on what you're watching, whether it's sports, whether it's stutter issue, right? They all have a setting that works. So I think the motion is fine on the flagships. Now, as we get away from the flagship, we may have some challenges, but the flagship TVs from the Samsung to the Sony to the LG, I think it's fine. Gaming motion is something different though. That's very specific to the games you're choosing. So that's going to have to be game specific. And generally the Samsung does really well with game motion. Isa, thank you for your follow-up. Super chat. Great stream. You're welcome. Fomo, thanks. Now give us a score out of 100 for the S95F and Sony Bravia 8 Mark II LG G5. So the S95F I've only seen in my first 2 streams of Value Electronics, but not in my more critical condition and not against the reference monitor. So I'll give you a score with the G5 and the Bravia 8. I believe the G5, okay, so uncalibrated, this is very critical. At the shootout, they will be calibrated. They will be closer rather than farther apart once calibrated, except for one thing. HDR impact, the G5, I'd say is a 90, right? So if 100 for HDR impact, the G5 is a 90. It is that impactful, right? Infinite contrast plus that level of brightness. The Bravia 8 Mark II would be an 80, and the S95F would be an 85. So you're going to have 8 Mark II, S95F, and then the G5, right? And it's that far apart for HDR impact. Skin tones, once calibrated, they're identical. But out of the box, the G5 is more accurate. Sony has a bit of this weird magenta push. You might notice it, you might not, depending on the scene. So I think the G5 wins there if reference is important to you. And shadow detail, this is where the G5 falls behind. Even though the Bravia 8 comes out a little bit lifted, you can bring it down by taking gamma down -2. You cannot do anything to the G5 without calibration. You really have to get in there and calibrate away some of these issues on the shadow detail. Or you can wait for the next firmware update. So I think G5 wins, a big win on the HDR impact, a slight lead on the skin tones, but they could both be calibrated back to the same. You can't do that with HDR impact. And shadow also, slight win for the Sony, but again, after calibration, they might end up looking the same. So net, G5 takes the lead. Out of 100, so I'd say 90, taking everything into consideration, and I kind of push for HDR impact, 90 to 82. Against the Bravia and Sony, be like, what, 82? I thought we were friends. Where's my Sony hat? Oh, can't find it. Sorry. Okay, next up, Max Overdrive. Thank you. Fomo, thanks for the G5 update. I feel LG will get us better shadow detail. I think they will. They'll get it. Everything else I love. Unfortunately, shadow detail is important to me. I like Sony's shadow detail better. Yes, Sony does this very well out of the box. You could adjust it to reference or you could see it better. Now, to be fair, on the G5, you turn dynamic tone mapping on in a bright room. It's fine. It's in a dark room that you're going to have issues. So Max, if you have someone that has a G5 and it's a bright room, try turning on dynamic tone mapping. It turns out you might like it. Or Cinema Home, you might like it, right? But it's not reference though. And so yes, good point. ColecoVision, have you noticed dithering? No. I know what dithering is, but I don't watch the content where dithering bothers me. So I'm not a dithering guy. I'm a stutter guy. If I see stutter, it kills me. I can't stand it. I go in there, I spend easily 30 minutes trying to fix the stuttering because I see the motion. But dithering doesn't bother me. So if ColecoVision, there is a scene, right? Give me the movie, give me the scene, give me the timestamp. I will look into it, but since it doesn't jump out at me, I'm not a dithering kind of guy. And mostly gamers are the ones that notice it. So, and I, PlayStation 5 Pro, right? Not an issue. If so, mention it to LG. So LG knows about the dithering, right? There are, Classy has mentioned it to them, exactly how to find it, as well as others. Again, I'm not a dithering guy. Like, I've sent videos to all the companies when it comes to motion. I mean, believe me, I sent them thorough motion video settings and they address it. But I'm not a dithering guy. I'm sorry, ColecoVision. I wish they didn't use it. Yeah, well, sharpening being what it is. Everyone loves it, but it results in artifacts. So, okay. Any more questions? Let's choose something random here. And by the way, thank you for spending your Father's Day with me. If you guys don't know, wife and kids are out in Hawaii having a good time, and I told them to go. Not like they abandoned me. Look, this is a girl's day out. Go with your sister, go with your aunt, have fun in Kauai. I'll spend time with my friends. When you come back, we'll do Father's Day later. It's just a date, whatever. We'll watch F1. So when they come back, I'm going to watch F1 with them. That'll be my Father's Day present. So don't feel too sorry for me. However, there are many of you out there who are not spending Father's Day with anyone. So I figure, you know what? Spend it with me. I'll give you guys some fun, hopefully. Okay, we'll wrap it up with a few more questions and then we'll do it. Oh, wait, is this the... Oh, what? Ah, what? Am I good or what? Look at this. It's actually the right scene. It's these little wins. It's like finding 5 minutes on a parking meter. Okay. So in short, dithering is a way to improve quality of a signal by adding noise. I didn't know that, Andy. Thank you for letting me know. And also, while you're at it, if there are scenes that dithering is, because I know Ratings had some scenes that they showed, but it wasn't obvious to me, right? So, but yeah, thank you for that clarification. I did not know that. And Princeton has a super chat. Just heads up, why don't we quit in 10 minutes, right? So how long have we been on? 2 hours. Let's make it a clean 2:15. So in 7 minutes. Nice round number. Oh, and I had a super chat from KG. Thanks, buddy. We'll get to that one next. Did the A95L have any of the issues the Bravia Mark II has? So, magenta tint? No. It could be a panel lottery. I'm going to leave that out there as a possibility. So it could be a panel lottery. Oh, what? There you go. I think they're matched now. I'm sorry, my type A personality, when I saw, like, wait a minute, they're off by it. Still off. So the answer is the A95L. If it's a panel lottery, my A95L is perfect as far as color out of the box. And I had it calibrated, though, at the time. These TVs are not calibrated, so because I wanted to see what you guys would get, right? I felt, not all of you get it calibrated, and it's unfair for me to say, oh, it's amazing, but then I got it calibrated. I would rather not get it calibrated, but have a reference monitor that's calibrated and see how different it is. And now I see the difference. The Bravia 8 Mark II definitely has a different white point. Now, it doesn't bother me per se, because when the other TV is not on, I go, oh, wow, it looks great. Yeah, I love it. And then it's on. Oh, wait, it's not the same. So the A95L will be similar. It'll have its own white point. However, the magenta tint wasn't there. And I'm not in a bright room. So for those of you saying, wait, it must be that bright room issue. No, this is 100%, that's the TV itself putting out that magenta tint. So the answer is, I didn't see a magenta tint on my on my A95L, but maybe my calibrator calibrated it out. Doesn't mean it didn't have it. That's the problem. So, and KG, thank you, my friend, for the super chat. Play Claire Obscure Expedition 33. I know that is your favorite movie, or not movie, favorite game of the year. I'm gonna have to. Is it on PS5 Pro? Show me. You know, it takes me so long to get out of the first few scenes because I have to get used to the controls or everything. But you know what I'm waiting for? I mean, I'm holding off for that new game that's coming out. It's similar to Black Myth Wukong. What is it? Feather something something. That's coming out in July. So maybe I'll wait for that one because I just so enjoy these Black Myth Wukong type fighting games. But okay, I might play Expedition 33. Thank you for the suggestion. Okay. Any more questions? Leaning teal on the G5. Oh, it's so hard to see these things on YouTube, but let me see if it's leaning teal. Maybe. Definitely very bright. The G5 is definitely very bright. Yeah, there's definitely a slight teal in this scene, which is kind of ironic, right? You would think. Okay. Any last questions and we'll wrap it up. Okay, Plasma says, Fomo, show an HDR color clipping test pattern to see the color brightness difference. So Plasma, this is why I don't do it. When you have a test pattern, the TVs perform completely different than in real scene. Because I've seen those test patterns like, wow, qd-oled does really well. And then you put in a real scene and the tone mapping kicks in. The tone mapping doesn't kick in those scenes in the same way, right? Like in this scene, is the G5 in a different, is it on dynamic tone mapping? Why is it so bright? Oh, it's standard, that's why. Whoops. Let's put it in. There you go. And I think the Sony might be off too. Let's see what the Sony's got. What mode is the Sony in? Ah, Vivid, so they're all off. See, this is why. Okay, now the Sony's in professional. Like, wait, why do these TVs look so different? Okay, so to your point, Corey, his points for these were reversed the other day, probably because they had them in different presets. Sony clearly having more blue than LG. Now it's reversed. You know what? Let's go back to that. Okay, because I wasn't even paying attention because the presets were off. Okay, let's try this again. Let's try this again. Well, we'll go to the very beginning. To your point. Okay, all right. All right. I think they matched up now. We'll see. You might be right. So they're both in professional mode on top, filmmaker mode on the bottom. No funny business, right? They're all in their default settings out of the box. And then I'll take some questions as we do it. It'll be reversed now because you changed it. Yeah, it might well be. But as you guys can see, these are great TVs, right? I would not complain with either one. But the Sony does look like it has more clarity here. You know what? Actually, it does have more clarity. I'm going to show you guys this. Like, what's happening? In that lower brightness, it had more clarity. I see more detail. I'm going to have to rewind it in a second. That was an actually excellent scene that I want to show off. What? Wrong remote. Okay, let's try this one again. Okay. Okay, right here, this Sony definitely wins for image processing of HDR content. Now, to be fair, the Sony is on an internal app and the LG is on my Chromecast. Should that make a difference? I don't know. So they're not on a splitter. And so maybe this goes to the image quality difference between a Chromecast and a native app. Because don't use this to determine that the Sony is necessarily better. Use it to determine that maybe there is a difference between a streamer and an internal app. No doubt. Again, the Sony is on its internal with Dolby Vision. Wait, is Sony on internal? No, I'm losing track. What the heck? Professional mode. Yeah. And look at the picture settings. Okay. No, I'm going to reset it one more time. I'm just so confused. Okay, here we go. Reset, default, yes. Okay, nothing's changed. LG is on Chromecast. Make sure it's not SDR or something random like that. You never know. Can't trust these streamers. Wait, I don't mean me, streamer. I mean the external streamer. It's on sports mode? The heck? Was I not on filmmaker mode? What is this? Oh, wait, that's sound. I was scared for a second. Okay, it is filmmaker. Let's make sure it's not SDR. Okay, it is SDR. Don't know what happened. What the heck? What is this? Okay, for whatever reason, my external streamer fed it as SDR. So this is even more confusing. And this is direct. This is not even my splitter. So you know what? I don't know what to say. I'm going to plug it back into the splitter. That direct thing did not work out. It was fine before, and then suddenly it became SDR. So forget everything I said about Sony being clear. It was HDR versus SDR, which, as we know, is no bueno. Okay, look, the clarity is back on the LG. Looks just like the Sony. And I'm going to put the Sony on the same splitter real quick. Okay, now they're on the same source. It was just too confusing to do it the other way. All right. Back to what we're talking about, the lizard foot. Okay. I hate when that happens. Welcome to our world, right? And I think the metadata is messed up as well. What's happening? Oh my goodness. I think someone wanted to watch robots. I think this is the one with robots. This is the world we live in. Oh, that's not the one. Here we go. That's nice and robotic, right? Okay. Is it the robots? Nope, it's the top one. It's the first one. There we go. And since we're back on the splitter, let's turn that reference monitor on for you guys to enjoy. I didn't realize it would be such a big hit. Again, Sony is doing things to make the Sony look better by sabotaging the LG. Did you just join us, Darko? Did I not just conclude that the G5 won this comparison? Come on. Come on. You're killing me. Is it not enough I wore the LG hat? Like, what must I do to convince you that I like the G5 more? Oh, wait. Did the Sony just get better? Is the Sony like, no, G5 still brighter. Yeah. See, the G5, not brighter, the G5 still more accurately matches the 3110. After all of that, at the end, I'm validated. So, okay. And just, hey, the G5 looks better in SDR. Yeah, and I think that was the conclusion of ratings. Okay, so at the end of it all, right? All these TVs are great. Sony, I think, does have a magenta tint. We're going to have to get that fixed. I'll talk to Sony about it, see what's up. And, well, until next time, my friends, thank you for showing up. Let me check any leftover super chats I have not answered. And there's a couple. All right, so let me finish this up. Louis Salazar. Upgrading my C1 OLED for gaming, and I'd love to know your current pick for the best gaming TV. It is the S95F if you're in a dark room. In a bright room, you're going to have issues depending on how it hits the anti-glare, depending on how bright it is. It lifts the black, might even shift from black to brown. Get the S95F in a mostly dark room, best upgrade, and it goes up to 77 inches. I don't think you'll be unhappy at all. That would be my recommendation. Asa Al-Shamsi. Sometimes I feel Sony, it's on SDR compared to LG. Yeah, you know, sometimes it is. That's what it feels like to me too. Because the LG does have the accurate HDR impact. It matches the EOTF very well because that's why the reference monitor is there. And as you can see, its white point is more similar to the reference monitor in this case. But don't worry, for the shootout, we'll have a calibrator that will make sure both TVs are on the same white point. And yes, others agree S95F is the best gaming TV this year, especially if you're a PC gamer. If you're a console gamer, they're all going to look great. PC gaming is a bit more. Okay, and with that, take it easy, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. I think I'm going to go, if I have time, a little trail running before the end of the day, and then see you guys next week. We're going to wrap this up in another video, so I'm going to put all this together, summarize it, and we'll see what happens. We'll see how many LG G5 fans come out of the woodwork, praise me, and how many Sony fans call me a traitor. Until next time, my friends, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stop the FOMO.